our municipal arborist, David Yan, who is going to talk to us today about an insect that is affecting our urban forest. Take it away, David.
Thanks, Chuck. Well, it's great to be with our folks again, and we are going to talk about the emerald ash borer, how it is negatively going to affect our urban canopy. And I want to begin by telling our folks about the environmental impact that our ash trees have on our community. Well, by the magic of television, I've been wonderfully transported in front of this row of ash trees in downtown Des Moines. I want to take this opportunity to tell you about many of the environmental and economic advantages of having ash trees in our community. We in the Forestry Division of the City of Des Moines Public Works Department wanted to find out what the environmental and economic value of trees was. So we took our average white ash, which would be 18 inches in diameter, and we discovered that it has significant annual benefits of $235. Included in that assessment is $89.25 provided to your property. Realtors tell us that having a tree in front of your property will add 7 to 14% value. Another one of the high numbers on record is stormwater retention. $66 is credited annually to that 18-inch white ash just by capturing stormwater, keeping it in the canopy of the tree or letting it slowly trickle to the ground instead of wasting it in our sewers and rivers. So overall, $235 of benefits every year. So we multiply that out times our 6,000 ash trees on the streets, and we find that we have $1.4 million in annual benefits. So to summarize the economic and environmental impact of ash, $1.4 million is a lot of money, and we certainly want to look after all the ash trees we can. Ash provide great beauty to our city. They provide color, shade, they provide perspective around buildings, and they give us cooling and oxygen. But on the horizon, emerald ash borer. This insect came to America in 2002. It landed in the Detroit-Windsor area, and it came from Asia. It was suspected that it came on wooden shipping pallets. The adult emerald ash borer can fit entirely on the head of a Lincoln penny, but that's not the part of the insect that does the damage. It's the larvae that winds its way underneath the bark of the tree in the cambium, that living area, and it so disrupts the flow of nutrients that it kills the tree in 2 to 4 years. Left to its own devices, the emerald ash borer would only fly maybe 1 or 2 miles a year. The great difficulty is that people are the main way that the insect gets spread around our country. It gets spread through nursery stock, through firewood, through green lumber, and green logs. So the Iowa Department of Natural Resources would love for us to buy our wood where we burn it. The reason that this insect is so significant, as you will see here in this series of photos from the state of Michigan where it first landed, trees are coming down by the millions. Ash trees cannot stand up to the emerald ash borer unless they're treated. Emerald ash borer is a very real threat to our urban forest. So let's learn something from history. There are 2 American trees that we see very few of these days. The first of those is American chestnut. Think chestnuts roasting on an open fire in that holiday song. These trees commonly grew to have 10-foot diameter tree trunks. And they had so many uses. As one author said, from baby's crib to the old man's coffin, they were used for everything. They had edible nuts, they made great furniture. Because they had long-lasting wood, they made great shingles, siding, telephone poles, and fence posts. But in the late 1800s, chestnut blight fungus made its way to America from Asia. It killed almost all American chestnuts, which at the time made up almost 50% of the hardwood forest on the eastern seaboard. Now American chestnut is just a distant memory from bygone days. The American Chestnut Foundation is running field trials to create blight-resistant chestnut trees, but it's going to take some time before we know if our attempts to revive American chestnut will pay off. Secondly, there was the American elm. More of our residents may remember the magnificent American elm. They had high arching tree canopies that would create a tunnel effect over the street. A number of U.S. cities called themselves City of Elms as a signal that they took great pride in their tree-lined streets. But in the 1960s through the 80s, many of our Native American elm trees lost the battle to Dutch elm disease. Trials are currently underway for elm hybrids that are resistant to Dutch elm disease, but here again it will take time to gauge our success in this comeback of elm trees. So this is our second example of a tree species being almost and totally wiped out. So now that the emerald ash borer is on our step, we need to consider if we are willing to let another tree species disappear. The good news is that there's some treatment readily available for good quality ash trees so they can stick around for our grandchildren to see and enjoy. So let's start with the basics. How, for instance, would I know if I have an ash tree on my property? I can show you here outside on this tree, and you'll also see some photos on your screen showing that there's a typical diamond pattern to the bark. As you look at particularly a middle-aged ash tree, you begin to sense that it has this diamond pattern. You see the dark spot in the middle and then the diamond outline. So for our green and white ash, these diamond-shaped ridges are one of the telltale signs that it is an ash tree. Another major identifier is the fact that the branches are arranged as opposites. There only are two trees with opposite branching, at least large trees, the other one being maple, and most people know what a maple leaf looks like. So at least by process of elimination, if you know your tree is not a maple and it has opposite branching, then it's probably an ash tree. You would ask yourself, are the compound leaves 9 to 15 inches long, each leaf having 3 to 11 leaflets? And are all those leaflets arranged as opposites? And then for color, the green ash turns yellow in the fall, and the white ash turns purple. Now that we've talked about how we might know if we actually have an ash tree on our property, let's ask this question. How will I know if and when I get emerald ash borer on my ash trees? You see on this first slide, taken in Burlington, Iowa, where they discovered emerald ash borer in the summer of 2013, that the upper canopy is yellowing, and in fact there's a lot of leaf structure missing. This is what we call decline in the canopy, and this is one of the telltale signs of emerald ash borer. You might also look for sprouts or sucker growth growing out from the trunk. This is a last gasp effort by the tree. It's saying to itself, I've got to survive somehow. I'll send out these latent buds and make some food from these leaves. Another sign would be cracks in the trunk, under which tunneling is visible. You may also look at the branching and stem structure of your tree and see if there's what we call woodpecker flecking. The woodpeckers chase the emerald ash borer under the bark, and in so doing they fleck or strip away some of the bark. So it gets this mottled, lightly colored appearance. And that's one of the telltale signs that your ash has emerald ash borer. Here's another shot of the sprouting or sucker growth at the base of a tree. And here's sucker growth high up in the canopy. Now when you look at this adult emerald ash borer and know that he only fits on the size of a penny, I may also tell you that this is not the dangerous part of the insect. It's true that he eats some of the leaf surface, but there's no way that he could ever kill a tree. It's this rascal, the larvae stage of the insect, living underneath the bark, that kills the tree. You will notice on the right-hand picture, down at the bottom, This is where the emerald ash borer adult laid some eggs under the bark, or on the bark I should say, and when the egg hatched, the tiny larvae burrowed under the bark and it began to eat its way under the bark in what we call the cambium, or that life part of the tree. And as the larvae got bigger, so did its trail. And this is the part that disrupts the nutrients coming from the roots to the canopy, and therefore killing the tree. Here's another and more extensive example of the damage that the larvae do to a tree. And ultimately, the bark can't hang on the tree anymore and begins to fall off as the tree begins to die. And then the last telltale sign, these D-shaped exit holes. The larvae, when it's fully grown, then goes into a different stage to become an adult, and that adult chews its way out in a D-shaped hole. It's D-shaped because the head of the insect is flat and the tummy is round. So it chews a 1/8 inch wide D-shaped hole from which to exit the tree and start the life cycle over again. So we've talked about how will I know if I have an ash tree, how will I know if I have emerald ash borer. Now we're going to say, how will I know if my tree is a good candidate for treatment? Well, here's the deal. Just like zebras and fingerprints and snowflakes, no two ash trees are alike. So there are two things that we actually want to look for in an ash tree that we're going to treat. The number one thing we're going to look for is that the ash tree has a lush green canopy. Think about the canopy on your tree for the last couple of years. Has it been green each year without major loss of leaves? That would be a healthy green canopy. Second thing we want to look for is root trunk flare. So you've got your wonderful, strong, sturdy tree trunk. And where the trunk comes down and starts to flare out to make the roots, that's what we call root trunk flare, and this should be visible or you should not be treating your tree. So those are the two things I want you to look for: healthy canopy and a root flare. But now I'm going to list some major defects that any one of which would disqualify the tree from treatment. The first is included bark and cracking. You will notice in the picture on the left side that the two stems are almost equal sizes. And this condition presents what we call included bark. You see the fissure between the two stems, and when that falls apart in a storm, you will see on the right side all that dark streaking. That's not actual wood, that was two bark surfaces stuck together and they had not bonded into a single tree. So it's not worth treating. You don't want to treat a tree with a cracked trunk. You don't want to treat a tree that's been over-pruned. Trees that have leaning trunks are not good candidates for treatment because lean may indicate weak or broken root systems. You'll see some high wheel mower damage on this tree. You don't want to treat a tree with bark damage. You certainly don't want to treat a tree that's had storm damage or been hit by lightning. Decay and fungus are also signs of illness and weakness in a tree and therefore disqualify it as a candidate for treatment. And finally, if it's got all of these advanced signs of emerald ash borer, do not treat this ash tree. Things like canopy dieback, sprouting or sucker growth, woodpecker flecking, or the D-shaped exit holes. Let's go ahead and ask one of our last questions. How should a homeowner proceed to manage emerald ash borer on their ash trees? The number one advice I have is be in touch real soon with a certified arborist. Check online at the International Society of Arboriculture to find a certified arborist in our area. Certified arborist is knowledgeable in tree care and tree health, and they're equipped and experienced both for removal and for treatment. The safest method of treatment for emerald ash borer is by trunk injection, as you will see in this photo. The City of Des Moines will be treating all of its public trees on the right-of-way and in parks using a product called Triage. According to the advice of the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, no treatment should take place before the insect has been positively identified within 15 miles of your location. You will see how this chemical is spelt on this slide: emamectin benzoate, trade name Triage. It's been approved for use by the EPA in all states in which emerald ash borer is found. The treatment is by injection, as you saw on the earlier slide, so that's a closed delivery system. Once it's in the tree, the chemical can't get back out, nor can insects and disease get into the tree. Furthermore, it's 99+% effective in killing both adult and larval emerald ash borer. And the group of universities you see listed there, Minnesota, Michigan State, and Ohio State, they're all in agreement. Their research indicates that there will be negligible environmental impact from this treatment on ash trees. Friends, much of what we like about Des Moines is linked to our urban tree canopy. We all love the trees that we live under and walk under and get to breathe their oxygen and look at their beauty. So I'm going to invite you now to get your plan together. Number one, do an inventory in your own yard. Do you have ash trees? Number two, make an assessment on those ash trees with a qualified arborist. That person can advise you on whether a tree is a good candidate for treatment or removal. Then get your budget in gear. Let's get cooking together. It'd be wonderful if we can save some of these trees for our grandkids, but most importantly, we want everyone to stay safe.